SRP reservoirs on the Salt and Verde rivers are at or near full capacity as the valley enters what is usually the heaviest use period of the year. And joining us now is Leslie Myers, Associate General Manager of SRP. Good to have you here. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
So how you doing there with these water levels? Sounds pretty good. The past couple of winters have really helped, huh?
We've had two really good years. Last year, this time we were 100% full on our system. And so starting off this year, we started off in such a good character that even though we had a pretty normal year this year, we're still at 90% full.
How does that impact planning as far as SRP looking for future water use and storage?
It's a great place to be, so we can look at, when we make projections towards next year and the year after, we hope that we, of course, have another good solid water year. And when we can start full, we can plan on being in good shape for the next couple years.
There's an equilibrium, I would think, at play here, is there not?
Absolutely, absolutely. It is, a lot of it is carryover. Once you get the reservoirs full. So the system is highly variable. And part of the reason why Salt River Project exists is that we needed reservoirs to get through those variable years. We have very high highs and very low lows. And so we have a lot of low years and we have a few really high years, but the reservoir system allows us to balance that out.
And yet you guys are working, especially Verde River now, on storage capacity. Tell us about that.
We are. So we have two reservoirs on the Verde side of our system. And when the water comes down off the Verde, like I said, it's not very often. So periodically we have these really high water years. Like last year, the water comes hard and fast, and it brings a lot of sediments with it. It stops at the upper reservoir, which is Horseshoe, and it drops all those sediments out. And over the years, we've lost about half of our capacity there. So what we're looking at doing is we've done some analysis, a lot of study work at different ways to address that lost capacity. And what we've come around to is perhaps building a larger dam and enlarging the lower dam, Bartlett Dam, so that we can recover that capacity in the lower dam.
So again, it modifies Bartlett Dam. And a quote here, renewable water resource to areas outside of SRP's water service territory. What does that mean?
That's a great question. Thank you for asking that. So when our original project was actually farmers in our service area put their land up for collateral to build Roosevelt Dam. And that area where those farmers lived became our water service area. So our water rights in our system belongs to that water service area. As we make these new modifications then, folks, we can bring in new partners that can apply for those water rights and take that water off project. So what this does is it helps us make up some of the differences, losses from shortages on the Colorado River. It's really an incremental step to be able to move water outside of our service area to make up for shortages other places.
And you mentioned service area. What is SRP's service area in general? I mean, the cities, I know Tempe is pretty much all SRP, is it not?
We have about 10 valley cities right in the center of town. It's about 275 square miles. We serve about half of the water in the metropolitan area. And it's a nice little compact area. And it's, as you know, it has a very reliable water supply.
Indeed. And now there are also plans to extend the release period from Roosevelt Dam.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
So Roosevelt Dam was actually modified in the early 90s, and we added flood control space. And the reason we added flood control space is because now Phoenix is the 5th largest city in the country, and we were pretty consistently, when we were in wet periods, flooding out the center of town in the Salt River. And in that flood control space, we added about 25 feet to the top of the dam and then more on top of that for safety purposes. We have a water control manual that is dictated by the Corps of Engineers. And the water control manual tells us we have to release water from that flood control space in 20 days. We did some analysis with the Corps and with the Bureau of Reclamation and determined that if we could hold water in that bottom 5 feet and release it in 120 days instead of 20 days, we could actually deliver that water to be used instead of just running down the Salt River. And we just got our approval from the Corps of Engineers. It was determined that it's risk neutral, so there's no additional risk. And it's a pilot project for 5 years, and we'll kick it off as soon as we get full enough to be able to use the deviation.
But fewer releases, would that mean, how would that impact riparian areas down the way?
So in general, we talked about we have very high highs and very low lows. In general, in a year that we get enough water to get into the flood control space, we are likely still going to be releasing water into the Salt River, either from the Verde or from the salt side, because we won't have enough space to actually hold it all. But in this space, we'll be, just for that specific space, we'll be able to draw that out. But for instance, a good example is last year, we released almost a full year's supply of water into the Salt River because we had such a great water year. So we would release about 1/7 less than that by using the flood control space. So that gives you an idea that there's still going to be water in the system, there's still going to be water in the river, but we're just going to be able to hold on to some of it, some more of it, to beneficially use it.
Maybe not quite as wide a channel as we're seeing right
Yes.
now. Leslie Myers, Associate General Manager of SRP. Good conversation. Good to have you here. Thank you.
Thank you.